Welcome to Society Begins at Home, a podcast by the University of Trinidad and Tobago. I am Raleigh Dominic Hussein, and this series explores the role of the family in shaping individuals and ultimately our society. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Carlos Corraspe, Acting Commissioner of Prisons. Welcome, Mr. Corraspe, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure to be here.
You are joining in the conversation. For the benefit of those who are viewing, tell us a little about yourself.
Let me express a good morning and thank you for having me. You said you had some other guests, so I'm glad to know that I fit into that august company.
Yes.
Certainly, I'm Carlos Corraspe. I've been in the prison service now for 36 years. This year carries me to 37, making my contribution as best as I can to the safety and security of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, but of course from a prison perspective. I would have joined the prison service in 1988 in the height of the recession, and I always say, you know, when the prison was taking, my grandmother said to me, "Prison is taking and go and see if you get through." And I remember coming into the Corraspe prison for the first time on a Sunday morning in 1988 and looking upstairs and seeing all these prisoners and saying to myself, in some level of trepidation, look where my grandmother sent me.
Why Granny do that?
You know, why she do that? And you know, many years later, 36 years later, I'm the Acting Commissioner of Prisons by dint of hard work and the blessings of Almighty God. And I look back now and I now understand why they say your grandparents are always correct. I didn't have the talent to represent the country at football or cricket or don the national uniform. But certainly I like to think that every day I put on this uniform, for the last 36 years, I've made a contribution to public safety in my small way as a citizen of this beloved republic. And certainly to the extent that the prison plays a role in crime repression, crime suppression when the persons are with us. And if we are able to do some level of rehabilitation, crime prevention, then certainly I think what we do as a prison service, not just me, but the collective agency that is the prison service, which I have the honor to lead at this time, that all that we do really speaks to enhancing public safety and reducing crime and criminality when the persons leave our institution.
What is your opinion of a good citizen, and what are some of the qualities you believe a good citizen should display?
Well, I can look at that question and give you the run-of-the-mill answer: honesty, integrity, patriotism. But I think the first criteria that is required is that the citizen must feel a sense of belonging. Because if you feel that you belong to something and you have some stake, some skin in the game, as they say, then you would want to protect it. And you would want to make a contribution that speaks to a valuing of what you have. And I think, so the better question is, if we are able to engender within our citizens a sense of belonging, this belongs to us, then certainly all the other values that flow from belonging will be important. So I'm saying patriotism, honesty, integrity, patience, awareness, all of these are part and parcel of a citizen who feels he belongs or she belongs to this republic.
Nice. So what role should the home play in helping persons become good citizens?
Well, all the sociological theories tell us that the home is the primary unit of primary socialization. But of course, the home is a compendium of so many things. All right. When I was a boy growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, the family structure was more traditional, extended family, father, mother, and grandparents, aunts and uncles. And then, of course, I grew up in a little village in the back of Sandra Ganness, so there was a sort of a cohesion in the society, even though we had different groups in that little village. But the family was beyond just simply your homestead. The persons will take care of you, they will make sure that you're doing what is right, and they had the ability to discipline you if they saw you were going errant or doing something that is wrong. Of course, in modern times, we have seen significant changes in these family ties. We move from the extended family to the nuclear family. We have different family patterns now, and therefore the question is, to me, is it that the role of the family is yet being achieved as a primary socialization unit in terms of what we want to see as citizens? So if that, because of course some of these things have come across because of the need.
Yes.
But certainly the question really is, are we generating the values in that different types of family structures that we need in a modern society?
I want you to speak directly now to parents and guardians, considering the challenges that we may know exist. What actions would you suggest that we could help overcome these challenges? What do you think that parents and guardians can do to help overcome some of these challenges that they may face?
Well, if I may look at it from the negative end, which is to say, from what I've experienced as a prison officer.
Yes.
What we have seen when we look at the reason why persons come into the institution and having committed crime, what we call a fancy word, criminogenic needs, which is to say, what is the factors that cause someone to commit crime in the first place? We see a level of antisocial behavior, which goes back again to the role of the family. Are persons, young persons, being socialized properly into the family setting in terms of the value system that the society needs to advance?
Yes.
That is a key area of research in terms of what we see when they come into the prison. Then we have another very big factor, antisocial associations. What is the company that they are keeping? So I'm saying when we look at that from antisocial behavior and antisocial associations, then parents have to ensure that they socialize their children in the right way, that creates the circumstances that will allow the child to be part and parcel of the family, part and parcel of the school, part and parcel of the community. And then, of course, very important is to make sure that when they are managing the young child, the company that the child keeps is critical, because if the child is exposed to persons who are not of the best intent or interest, then even though they're properly socialized, they could find themselves in a dangerous place. And then, of course, drug use and all of these things that flow from that. So from a prison perspective, or what we have seen over many years, if these are the factors that cause persons to come into prison, then certainly we would say, in terms of the family socializing, that we would want to make sure the socialization process doesn't put them at that risk, and those dangers.
Yes. What role do the neighbors and the community and the church, or even the network, the tribe, play in helping young people understand what it means to be a good citizen and helping in the support of their development?
Well, certainly, when we talk about values, if you are just looking at your family setting and you are not able to find those values, that role model there, if you have persons in the community who see that as a responsibility, then even though someone grew up, as you said, in a single-parent household, there may be a gentleman in the street, in the neighbor, in the community, who they could look to as a father figure, all right? So that even though that person may not have their father with them in the household, in the community there is someone who might be a father figure, a big brother figure, someone who is looking out for their best interests. I will tell you this. When we were young boys growing up in the village, as I said to you, there were persons who were engaged in errant and criminal conduct. For instance, there might have guys who would have been smoking marijuana and engaging in drug use. But if we as young boys would come in that space, they would run us. It wasn't something that they felt, yes, they were in a situation where they were using drugs, but they didn't want that for us. And that is a good example. So they would run us there. We couldn't be around them, even though they were doing something negative. Now, the question is, to what extent is that happening? Would they encourage the other younger boys to engage in behavior that they know is destructive? Or are they taking that responsibility to say, I am already in it, but I don't want that for you? And that is the big brother, that is the neighborly principles that we need to have in the communities that go outside of the family. And the mother would know that even if her son is straying, somebody out there will say, no, that is not for you, go back, and may even report it to the mother.
What would you say to them to encourage them to ensure that they do well in raising their children?
Well, I am no, certainly I don't pretend to be an expert in these matters. I think parenting, there is no book, there is no one set of rules that applies to all.
Yes.
Every circumstance tends to be different, but I think what I certainly would like to see is older parents who have had success in raising their children, that they be given an opportunity to have conversations with younger parents, whether it be done in the community centers, all right, whether it be done in the church setting. But certainly sometimes we take certain things for granted. Even though we know one size does not fit all, there are certain commonalities in good parenting.
Yes.
For instance, I would encourage any parent, even though we speak about education at the general level, I always think the main aspect of it is reading. Reading is a key component to learning, because there is not a single subject, even the mathematical subjects, you still have to read.
Reading and understanding what you read.
Understanding what you read.
Yes.
I'm a strong proponent for reading.
Yes.
I think that we should have persons who retire go back to the primary schools and sit with the younger children and have reading sessions.
Yes. Read aloud.
Read aloud,
Yes.
because separate and apart from learning to understand things, reading takes you into other places.
Of course.
Children must be able to dream.
A
If you
sense of
lose the
wonder.
ability to
A
dream,
sense of wonder, adventure, yes.
so even though I grew up in very humble and poor circumstances, I saw the world through the eyes of different books. And I
Yes.
knew there was something bigger than where I was.
Yeah.
And then I started to dream of what is possible. So that years later, when I was in an economic position to be able to go out and see the world, I would always match it back up to the imaginations I had as a boy. To see London, to see New York, to see the places, to understand that I am just a part of something bigger. I think that is something that our young people, we need to inculcate in our young people.
So what would you say are some of the challenges that young people face which may influence their desire and effort to exhibit those traits of a good citizen?
Well, I will go back to my grandmother again. Every Saturday, when we were young children growing up, I grew up with my grandmother mostly and my cousins. And every Saturday, we had a black and white television then, and Saturday morning you want to see Spider-Man and the cartoons. And she would take off the TV. She would lock up the house, and she would carry us in the backyard garden. And she said, we're going to do, in those days in Trinidad, we would speak the broken patois. So she would say, we're going to do Matthias work. And that is to say that this week she might dig a hole here to bury something, and next week we dig back up the hole and take out something. We'll be engaged in agriculture, in planting. And during those sessions, you miss your television, you're getting sandflies biting you, you're angry, you're vexed. But you learn to cope. In that simple way, you learn to cope. You learn patience. All right? You learn that when you are planting something, to see it grow. The ability to defer gratification. That is something, we want things instantly without recognizing that it takes time.
And
it
we
takes
see that
effort,
so much these days,
Yes.
Instant, they just want it now.
Instant. Instantly. And so patience,
Eroded.
a little long suffering.
Yes.
These are the qualities that I developed. Later on, when I went on to university and I was struggling with certain subjects, my ability to stick to the task, things that I learned as a boy going through those, I could then go back to it. Now I'm speaking to you, I can cross-reference it. At the time, of course, I didn't. I just saw it as, what's the use of this? But when I grew older and I started, my ability to pay attention to details and to stick to things came from those experiences as a young boy.
For families, parents and guardians experiencing these challenges of molding their young people to becoming good citizens. We already established that there's no one-size-fits-all. But some of these challenges that we're seeing with that patience and that even perseverance, because sometimes, you may be doing something and it doesn't work, we may have to revisit it. We may have to take a while to build those habits.
Yes.
So patience is so important. But what are some other things you think parents and guardians and the family, the challenges they may experience, how would you help them to address it so that they technically don't end up by you?
Well, certainly we don't want that.
Yes.
One of the things I should also say, Trinidad and Tobago is a complex society, and it's a society of many parallels. So I do not, oftentimes I always try to take the position that many of the issues that we have is really with a minority group. The majority of citizens are about young persons going about their business.
And doing well.
Even as things happening in a negative way, you have people going to university, studying all-nighters, doing the work that it takes to achieve success.
Yes.
And sometimes they are lost in the conversation or in the narrative. Many times the persons that we are concentrating on are the persons who not seemingly being able to achieve this. And certainly we want to figure out why that is so, because there are so many opportunities here in terms of our education system, whether from the nursery right up to tertiary, there are opportunities there. So certainly the question is how do they see themselves, and what is the perspective that they present themselves, or how do they see themselves through that looking glass? Those persons who struggling, but I always am careful, and I think sometimes we have to be mindful of. We could take the exception to make the rule.
Right.
It is not the exception. Those are persons who are having challenges. And we as a society can say, look, let us see how we can assist them. Let us see how we can engage them. As I said from the start, the whole issue of, do they see this as a place that they own? Do they own the fact that they are young persons in a place that they can see the opportunities that present itself? And so I think spending time with the young persons, having conversations with them. I know persons are fast-paced and they have to get the job done. Parents are always trying to meet the economic demands and the needs, but sometimes it's just taking time out to spend time with the children, find out what is going on with them.
It becomes overwhelming for many of them.
At the end of a day.
Yeah.
What has happened to you? What is happening in school? I remember when my son was leaving primary school, going on after SEA, one of the teachers told me, what has worked for him is that stay in contact with your child. Do not allow your child to think, no, you're going to secondary school, that the child is on their own. Always be part and parcel. So you're speaking about life. To the extent to which you could attend the PTA meetings, attending the football games at school, the cricket matches, when they have a swim if they're swimming. All of these things are, you are showing an interest, and you are finding out, you're getting to know who your friend, your sons or daughters' friends are while they engage in. So they know who you are. You're not a stranger in this journey.
And that's building a community important. Right there.
Right there, in the school.
Yes. Many parents experience so many different challenges. What can you say to those parents? What actions can they probably incorporate in their parenting to help them with their children, grooming them to make sure that they become good citizens and that they are mindful of what it takes to become good citizens?
Well, the first thing I say to parents, please do not despair. Do not give up and do not lose hope. Every day is another opportunity to make a difference in the child's life. Assist the school in what it is trying to do. Have conversations with your teachers, because we know that our children are one thing to us, and when they're in the school environment, it's something completely different. But to the extent that you're having conversations with the teacher, you can know that difference. Expose the children to as much as you can when they're young. All right? Do not take the position that is academics only. Every child has so much skill and talent in them. It's just a question of us unearthing that, and not necessarily unearthing it, but putting them along the track that will allow it to come out. Right. And then the child will run with that ability because it's there. All right? So whatever you do, sports, some skill, art, even singing, all of these opportunities, and you may find it doesn't require much resources. It may be in the church, it may be in the youth group, it may be in the cultural center. the child has so much possibilities, and it is our job as parents to carry them along and see that comfort. And I will say what I said, bedtime reading. Bedtime reading, no matter how tired you are, no matter how weary you are, take the book and go to them and read. Once you start to get them to see the world beyond where they are, they will take the book up and read even when you are tired. But we have to start the process.
These children
and
emulate
continue
parents.
to support them.
They emulate parents.
Yes.
So if you're reading at home,
yes,
they will read. They will
continue
follow.
to support
Yes.
them in all that they do. Continue to have conversations. Remind them that they're not in this journey alone. All right? And the rest is up to God, really.
Yes.
Because we all have no monopoly on how it works out, but God is in charge.
I would like you to really appeal to our young people. All right? So in your closing words, right, for young persons that may be experiencing challenges and who may not see the value of being good citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, leave some closing remarks for them.
Well, I want to say to young persons out there that the country of Trinidad and Tobago belongs to you. We are old fogies, as they say. Our time has passed, and we are decelerating, and you are the ones who have to accelerate. I want to say to you that I'm a Christian, and that I believe that every value, every talent, every skill that God has placed in you is for a purpose and a reason. You must find purpose in your existence, even if that purpose initially is to make your parents proud of you, is to achieve something that you know that your mother and father would want for you. And I want to say to them as well that you may see other persons engaging in activities that you know you have been taught is not correct. Do not follow them in that regard. Trust your instincts, trust yourself. All right? You are filled with possibilities, and all of these can be achieved in the fullness of time. And please do not be afraid to dream. Dream big. Dream to make a difference. Dream to make a change. Because all of us who are now adults will tell you that we are here today in the positions that we find ourselves in because we have dreamed. And we do not want you to lose sight of that. And even as you dream, then you have to work towards achieving those goals. With God's grace and God's goodness in your lives, you shall achieve it. And Trinidad and Tobago will be all the better for it.
Thank you very much to Mr. Carlos Corraspe, the Acting Commissioner of our Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. Thank you so much for the time that you have shared with us. And we are sure that our series is being well received by you, our audience, and we thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Looking forward to another episode soon. I'm your host, Raleigh Dominic Hussein, thanking you so much for joining, and we'll see you in our next edition of Society Begins at Home.